I'm really curious to know that, or to hear what your take on risks now for yourself. I think when you're putting yourself out there for the first time, whether it's starting a business or writing your book, you're taking a lot of risk for yourself financially, maybe emotionally as well. But now that you've had this book and you're saying you're restarting your business, and now you share your home with your husband, what is that taking a risk? Has that shifted in terms of your values and what's going forward from here?
Yeah, it's interesting. So imagine this for everybody who's listening. I came to Australia by myself with one suitcase, a backpack, $300 at 16 years old. So for me, that did not even occur as a risk, because where I was coming from in Zimbabwe to coming to Australia was already going to be a million times better.
Yeah.
So that does not look like a risk to me.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward, I've been here in Australia for 24 years. I'm an Australian citizen. I'm married. My husband is a new migrant himself to Australia. I'm predominantly the financial earner in the relationship. And I also support my family in South Africa as well. So the risk is higher for me because there are other people who are dependent on me. At 16 years old, there's barely anybody depending on me. Nobody's depending on me.
Yeah.
At 40 years old, I have four or five people who are dependent on me.
Yeah.
So there's a real consequence to other people's lives if I fail.
Yeah.
So the risk is greater. Now, how do I manage that? The first thing is, I'm still very clear that this is my purpose in life. So, and humility comes into this. If I have to go and get a job to support my family, I will. There's no shame in any of that. It's life. The thing about it, though, is I share openly what my feelings are with my inner circle and my husband. And nobody is telling me to go get a job. All the communication is, you have to keep going, you have to keep moving forward, because there's nobody else doing what I'm doing the way I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So to be believed in so much, especially by my husband, who's predominantly more dependent on me also being successful. Like, don't get me wrong, he's got his own money, he's got his own homes, would be fine if something didn't turn out.
Yeah.
But we're creating life here in Australia, it's harder. So for him to keep saying, keep moving forward, even when he sometimes feels like, where's the money going to come from?
Yeah.
Is invaluable. What that communicates to me is that I chose my husband well, because he is one of my champions, irrespective of how the material world may look.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting to hear the shift between when you were at 16 and where you are now, taking risks. And it doesn't have to necessarily be about business, but just making decisions on how you're going to, where you're going to start your life, how you're going to continue building it.
Just a quick announcement before we return to the podcast. If you're enjoying this episode of Midweek Motivation, you may be interested in checking out the Midweek Motivation newsletter, where every week I'll share with you a useful lesson on resilience, mindset, or fitness, or health in general, straight to your inbox. You also receive a free workout of the week, useful resources, and the latest videos that I've got up there. And just if you want to keep updated on my life, you'll find everything there. If you're interested in that, go ahead and hit the link in the description below, or go to Substack and search up Midweek Motivation. All right, let's return to the podcast.
I had this interesting conversation with my partner this morning, actually. And I asked her, do you think it's, with the Australian dream, is it more accessible to people now, or is it harder? At least I can only say from this spot in Sydney, where the cost of living is higher. I'm wondering what your take is on that.
And I'm also interested on your take on it.
Okay.
So I think that one of the Australian dreams, particularly because, I know you've got a global audience, is buying your own home. Having your own home and having a backyard is one of the Australian dreams. And if that's not available, we blame the government for that. It's part of what it means to have a fair go. And it's one of the privileges in living in Australia is the space, the lifestyle. And in my opinion, I've been here, for 24 years, and it's not accessible. The recent stats have said that the average home price in Australia now is $1 million. That could be Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, Perth, Brisbane, $1 million. So if you look at it globally, we're talking millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And our currency is a relatively strong currency, not as strong as the US dollar, but it's not a weak currency.
Yes.
And we are a industrialized technological country. So for that, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, who's making $1 million? You know, or even being able to save the deposit for a home that costs $1 million. So people who have access to this will be typically people, engineers who are paid very well, some lawyers who are paid very well, or tradies who are being paid very well.
Yeah.
So, and it's not across all of Australia. So in the good old days, access to buying a home, irrespective of your income in Australia, was accessible to the majority of people.
Yeah.
So, but what is it like for you?
Yeah, no, I think it's less accessible now.
Yeah.
To have the Australian dream and bear in mind, I had the privilege to grow up here, and I've had support from my family financially. I had access to university, but now where I think university is more accessible to a lot more people, the cost of going there is just like skyrocketed. And I think at the end of the day, once you've graduated, doesn't guarantee you a job. I think there's a lot more job shortages now. Speaking to a lot of the people in my network in Sydney, so I can't say this for across the country, but people around my age are thinking about moving to Brisbane or Adelaide or Perth because the cost of living is cheaper. It's easier to buy a house. There's more jobs becoming available. And yeah, I think trying to buy a property with land is very difficult these days, especially for young people to do that. And then I guess they're trying to stay with their family for as long as they can to save up for a mortgage. Yeah, I think I can only imagine how difficult that would be for someone who's migrating to Australia, where they don't have the initial setup where they have a family living here, and then trying to find their own place.